So again, thank you for joining IAP2 Intermountain for this month's Learning Lunch. For those of you who are new, this is our monthly get-together of the IAP2 Intermountain chapter, and we get to learn about engagement projects in our chapter, practice new public participation techniques, and also discuss issues facing our profession. These are held the second Thursday of every month in the same time slot, 12 to 1, and you're always welcome to join us. I'm Liz Bueller. I'm on the board of IAP2 Intermountain. And for my day job, I work for Salt Lake City's Information Management Services Department, and I'm the innovation team lead. I know we also have some past IAP2 USA board members. Leah, I'm pointing in your general direction, but we just want to thank you for joining us today. And for those that are not regulars at these learning lunches, just know that you are always welcome. So I'm very excited about today's topic. Today, we're revisiting a discussion that we had last June, if you can believe it, hybrid engagement. Now, when we talk about hybrid engagement, we're not talking about engagement campaigns that have both an in-person and online component, but rather engagement sessions where you are doing both simultaneously. You're engaging in person and online. And this type of engagement isn't for external events only. This could be an engagement event for a project. It could be a public meeting hosted by a governing body. And it could also be an internal team meeting as we're moving into hybrid work environments. So I'm really excited again that we're revisiting this topic. When we did this in June of last year, we had a really great discussion, and it was in that time where I think a lot of us were hopeful that we would be moving to more in-person events. It was that small window between vaccine availability and the Delta variant increasing counts in the country. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's very topical as a lot of us, as case counts are going down and more of us are going into hybrid and in person. I think it's really great that we're back on this subject. So again, thank you everyone for coming today to share. Now, I just want to say up front, I don't think anyone in this group has all the answers. If you came for that, I apologize, but really it's so we can learn from each other and share in this collaborative space, things we've learned, things we're hoping for, and some successes we've had. So just a couple housekeeping items. Because this is an open discussion, we highly encourage you to turn on your cameras. We recognize that this is over the lunch period, so we each have our own unique working situation. So if you can't, that's okay, but just know that you're encouraged to do so. Also ask that you mute your mics when you're not speaking. That just helps to keep the conversation going, again, because we're in Zoom and not in person. And if you'd ever like to share anything, either raise your hand by hovering over your name in the participants list, or if you're uncomfortable speaking, please also feel free just to drop a message in the chat box and we'll make sure we share it. So again, before we get started, I want to just thank everyone for joining us today. And how I'd like to start is by starting with a poll, because I think we're all in different spaces right now in where we are with hybrid meetings. So the poll is, where is your organization in moving from virtual to in-person or hybrid? Have options. Maybe your organization has decided to stay remote. Maybe you're just now putting your toes in the water for in-person and hybrid. Maybe you've been doing hybrid for several months, and maybe the new normal for you is going in person all this time. So just give it a minute or two for people to drop in their responses. All right, so it looks like some of you have been doing hybrid for several months, so just be warned, we're probably gonna ask you how it's been going. We know others are just starting to test out in person and hybrid after probably about a 2-year break. And then some of you are still staying remote. So thanks everyone for your participation. And here are the results. You can see. All right, so for those who said that they've been doing hybrid for several months, are there any lessons learned that you can share with the group? And I should warn you, I know a lot of you on this call, and I am not afraid to call people out.
Do you want people to put stuff in the chat or talk?
Either way, it's an open format.
Organizationally, like our internal firm, we haven't been doing hybrid just because there's so few of us. But for our clients, we've done a couple of hybrid open houses, including one like March 2020. So we've had a little bit of practice with the hybrid. I think the biggest lesson that we learned was creating a bigger presence for the people who are virtual, instead of just having them on a laptop, like in a corner, and people in the room being able to see them, actually making them feel like they're more part of the room. And so people can see their facial expressions like on a larger screen. That's really been helpful for us.
So Hillary, if I can ask a follow-up question on that, has it been, when you say bringing them, expanding their presence, was it just having them on a larger screen, or did you do anything else?
So we had them on a larger screen, and then we actually moved the webcam to that larger screen. So when people were directing questions to the screen or the person there, they were actually more like they were interacting with the individual.
Oh,
we've
cool.
done it more in a panel sense and not necessarily like an open flow, open house sense, because I can't figure that one out, but yeah.
Nice. Does anyone else have any lessons for those who have been doing hybrid for a little while?
A couple of things we've learned are just, I think when we're digital, I think it sort of feels a lot like our regular meetings. And I notice a lot of my team fall back on really technical language, where when we're in person, we sort of remember to use less formal language. And so as we've been trying to mix those, really being conscious of the written materials and the speaking points being at sort of that 5th grade level. I feel like for some reason, because we were doing a lot of things digitally, that just sort of went by the wayside a little bit. I'm not really sure why. We just sort of reverted back into our technical selves, maybe because we were doing our technical meetings the same way.
Is there anything you're doing to help with that? Reminders or preparations ahead of time?
Yeah, as part of not only our materials prep review, but just as part of our team preps in advance of any of our events, we were talking about using plain language and really being conscientious about that.
Nice. Are people experiencing any other challenges in hybrid engagement?
Ooh, hi, Bree here. Audio, I think, has been one of the bigger challenges, depending, we're so used to being in these formats with our headphones or just our laptop speakers, but we've had to, we haven't been doing a ton of hybrid ones. It's kind of been, we're either doing online meetings and just that, or, just in person, but we did a couple just smaller stakeholder group meetings, and, we ended up having to, kind of what Hillary had mentioned with positioning the webcam better, so you could actually get like a full view of the room for that engagement. But we were also using outside audio as well, not just like internal with our computers. So setting up kind of a larger not, whether it was incorporating more microphones for groups to pass around. And we were also kind of like what we do on our conference phone lines as well, with just like those multiple satellite speakers throughout the room. Because at first it was just, oh, we can pass a microphone, but it turned out it was a little bit easier for everybody if we could use satellite speakers. So like any of your Bluetooth or like home pods are actually really, really useful to act as that microphone / audio. Because that was kind of one of the bigger complaints I think we got is, oh, this is like the presentation looked great, but we can't hear you. Or they could hear the speaker, but they couldn't hear other people in the room like asking questions and stuff.
Nice. That's really good to know about audio and the considerations for audio. How does it feel? How do the participants feel? Bree, you mentioned that where some of the people online asked about audio issues, but how are you making sure that it's equitable for those that are online and in person, making sure that as they engage, it's, they have that same opportunity to engage?
It's quite challenging, honestly, because sometimes, there's the side conversations that everybody seems to have when there's this giant room. So trying to remind folks that like, it's okay to have these side conversations, but just, maybe interject a little bit, and have them less be side conversations and just make it more okay just to sort of interrupt the presenters to have that discussion, as opposed to just the side ones where, we can maybe hear it in the room, or a couple people can, or, we like our team members could pick up like, oh yeah, I heard you guys talking, great question, let's bring this in. So I think it's more of like a monitoring and just trying to ask folks to limit those sorts of things, or just honestly, it's also felt like just getting a lot more informal as well. Like these are less, rigid. I mean, we have like an agenda to stick to because we have a finite amount of time, but, to Leah's point about using clear language and just making it just seem more conversational, I think, and so everybody feels a little bit better about just speaking their thoughts loudly to the group, as opposed to just the person sitting next to you, which I think like sometimes can, well, at least in my experience, there's always like the main meeting and then there's like the side meeting. And I don't know how you guys have been doing, with like the chats and stuff too. I know that's always kind of an interesting mix as well, with people that want to speak versus they would just rather enter stuff in chats and don't speak. And I don't know how you engage that a little bit better. So I'm totally open to hearing that.
Well, does anyone have has anyone experienced that and can help Bree out?
All we get are people in the chat. And then when we try to encourage them to just turn their camera on or speak, they just don't. They stay in the chat.
Exactly. Like it's their safe space for whatever reason.
I would love to hear ideas though.
I know. Without being like, seriously, guys, turn your cameras on.
And I think we're all there, right? You want to encourage people, and then but it's also hard to just have that blanket rule, because there could be a lot of reasons on why they don't have their cameras on. Sometimes it's because they don't want to participate as much, but sometimes it might be bandwidth issues or, other things, or they're balancing 5 different things, and they might have kids or dogs or something going on in the background, or they're sharing workspaces with others. How talked about engagement events. How has it been for these more formal meetings? Because sometimes we have to support, governing bodies, say a city council, or at least because since I work in the city, I always think of planning commissions and boards and commissions, things like that. But how has it been supporting those organizations with these hybrid styles when they're trying to listen to constituents in both in person and online?
I think you're probably directing that to me. It's been a roller coaster. right now we run 2 programs. So whereas we were just broadcasting meetings before, now we actually have to be very cognizant of the whole online, the WebEx community that's there, because they see something different than what broadcast does, and making sure that both of them get to interact at the same level has been a challenge. And thankfully, just the way that meetings are run in general, having, a chair clearly defined, and then having staff members, particularly council staff members, pay really close attention to, both online callers and folks that WebEx in, as well as constituents that are in the room, is super important. And it's working out really well, finally. We had a lot of hiccups in the beginning, so it takes time, but it is working, and we think it's working pretty well, and I think they're going to stick with it. So yeah, we'll see.
It feels with everything we're sharing today that it goes back to our base facilitation skills, and we need to be very deliberate in how we plan this. It's not, oh, let's just throw an event together, and if it worked for in-person only back, it'll be great. Or if it's when we are just doing online, we can just switch to a hybrid. We have to be very deliberate and go to our base skills of developing agendas, making sure everyone knows their assignment, thinking about how do we engage all of our audiences. And probably, I'm guessing for a lot of us, it's considering how we report out, so people know how their voice was heard if they were online or in person. Are there any other tips?
So we've kind of, just for some of the projects we've worked on, set up pretty straightforward, like checklists, basically like participant guides ahead of time. So like well in advance to any of our meetings. So folks have kind of an understanding of essentially how they'll be engaged with, on either platform, whether it's been in person or hybrid. And that's been kind of helpful, I think, over the past little bit. Especially, we've conducted a hearing mainly online, although we did kind of a hybrid option where we did an in-person hearing, but we live streamed it on Instagram Live and on Facebook. And I mean, those weren't formal comments, but we were still, providing informative links and stuff for people that were asking. But I think that was really helpful for us over the past couple of years, is just setting expectations up well in advance before people were coming. Is they just knew what they were getting into, and they could choose how they wanted to participate or not, but if it didn't meet their needs.
What technology are people using to do these? Hillary, how are y'all doing that with your, what do you use? Are you just using Zoom for your videos, or are you using a specific software?
We're just doing Zoom for most of them. We did a hybrid ribbon cutting, which just sounds like, whoa, it was a lot, that we streamed on Zoom, Facebook, and then we had our professional video crew there who was also doing the video to help make the production level really high and for the audio. Mostly, I mean, we've done them in different scales. So we've done like a real low tech one with a phone, but this one had the governor involved, so we wanted to make sure that he could be heard, and that worked really well, having kind of the professional cameras, the professional audio boards, so we could move the volume up and control like vibration and things like that. But at the end of the day, the base technology was Zoom. We've tried Microsoft Teams, and it can be a little clunky when we're running video. We've experienced. So unfortunately, I think Zoom has the monopoly on hybrid meetings, for us at least.
Is there any other technology that people would suggest for those who are just starting to test out hybrid?
I was gonna ask, UDOT uses publicinput.com as their sort of main engagement platform and for project web pages now. And I wondered if anyone on the call had run a public meeting through public input, because it does have that capability. I haven't done it.
I have, and it sort of depends on what you're doing, because it's sort of like a third party streaming service. So it's essentially like the broadcast TV. So we tried it out and it just wasn't like the right fit for like our community group. So we just went back to using Zoom as a base, because the only way they could engage with you would be to call in via a phone, or to, through the messaging that gets set up through the meeting. So it's very much like a one-way conversation. I mean, okay, technically it's two ways, but since we're so used to verbally and seeing each other, it feels very much like you're in a vacuum. I know some other projects have tried it as well, for hearings where it is a little bit more formal and there's less back and forth. So it probably depends on like the type of meeting, but for our phases in some of these environmental studies, like we're just not that far along. And we needed to be engaging with the community members, and they kind of wanted to turn their screens on and talk to us and give it to us straight. So I will say, if you're just wanting to merely broadcast something, it certainly works and they unify everything into one service. But the caveat is it just kind of feels a little bit empty. And when you're trying to form closer relationships with their communities, we've kind of gone between Zoom webinars and just regular Zoom, kind of depending on the size of the group. But yeah, I don't know. The public input can be useful for some things, but I think it's a little challenging personally, for some of those meetings.
And I'm from UDOT. I would go ahead and agree with Bree from my conversations with Becky Parker. I haven't run any myself, but she does say, yes, it seems like it's great for project web pages, and some of their other tools. But we've definitely found their meeting software platform kind of challenging for those virtual meetings. So.
I put it in the chat, but we use Mentimeter, where we started to use Mentimeter more in a hybrid format. And that has been really helpful because we broadcast the polls up on the screen and people can participate in the room on their phone or at their computer. And it gets those chat dwellers to participate more without having to like be seen or heard. So it's really helpful when we need like a lot of heavy data or analytics, like we need to know what the room thinks about certain topics. Not so great for a conversation where you just want to have a dialogue, but I like that tool a lot.
For Mentimeter, and I admit might be personal ignorance because I've only used it for either all in person or online. I haven't used it in a hybrid setting yet. Did you have to change anything you did to set up the poll or think about the questions, anything like that, or you just run it like you normally do?
Just run it like normal through Zoom. Zoom actually has an app integration that you can use through it. But the user interface, whether you're in person or online, is pretty much the same.
Nice. For folks who are mostly using Zoom for the hybrid, do you ever integrate, besides Mentimeter, do you integrate anything else into it? Maybe like a slide deck or other apps into it? And if you do you experience any issues for the experience for the in-person audience versus the online audience? I think sometimes of like videos that are shared, sometimes if it's in person, but then if you also are trying it online, sometimes it can affect because of download speeds. I didn't know if anyone's experienced that or even has a solution for that.
When we broadcast, we do all of the in-person presentations are still done on the WebEx platform. So everybody's seeing the same presentation, and that's really, we were just broadcasting on a video wall, but obviously the folks that are on WebEx can't see that unless it's, we switch directly to it, and then it's not as good because it's only showing up in a small tile right? Instead of when you broadcast on WebEx with a share screen, you're getting the whole screen experience. So there's an engagement level there that I think that works better than keeping it separate. Does that make sense?
It does. So thinking about, don't try to run them concurrent, but if you're using WebEx, even for the in-person audience, that's what you use to share in that meeting space. And
Right.
in that way, it's seamless for
Right.
however
So,
folks are.
yeah, so the video wall is broadcasting the entire WebEx session. So everybody in the room watches the video wall. They get to interact with folks that are on the WebEx session plus see the presentation. And then the folks that are on the WebEx side, they see the same thing. I mean, we broadcast all of the room cameras to a tile. So, I mean, there's a level of interaction there for the WebEx participants too. So they actually get to see, what the room is and who's in the room. So it's complex, but I think it's the way to do it when it comes to presentations and such. Because I can't think of any other way that you could get everybody to see the same information.
Let me ask, let me shift the focus now and beyond lessons learned, but also what we think is going to happen in the future. Do we think we're in a space where we're going to be expected as P2 professionals to continue to offer these hybrid engagements? I mean, the landscaping is always shifting, but I'm just wondering how people, if you could look into the future, what do you think?
I think so. I mean, more and more people are moving in person again, and we're certainly seeing a demand for that in-person connection. But there are still people, and I think this will continue to be the case, still people that would prefer or only have the capability of tuning in to a meeting virtually. And I think what we found is we actually get a different batch of people participating virtually than we would in person. So it helps to serve that more, make our meetings more equitable for people to participate, and then people wanting to have the recordings after the fact. So there's kind of like threefold: in person, hybrid, during, and then after. They want to be able to look back at that meeting. Makes our jobs more complicated, but it serves more people, so that's nice.
And I would say at UDOT, we've found our preference is to have two separate meetings, to have an in-person meeting and to have an online one, and to try to avoid the hybrid circumstance when possible, just because presenting it is just different. And so that's kind of the way we're headed at UDOT, is to do two public meetings instead of just one, and to have one solely online.
That was going to be my question. I suspect we're going to see opportunities for both in person and digital, and whether they're going to be simultaneous or not. But what I think is going to happen is that provision, depending on the type of meeting it is, right? If we're talking about council meeting, that's something very different than a project specific type of thing. But yeah, I think you're right. I think things like council are going to continue to stay in the hybrid fashion, where things like project specific, you may end up resorting to a video and an in-person meeting and a digital meeting, keeping them separate, or expanded online services and in-person meetings or things like that.
Hillary brought this up, and I think it's something we all face. How are people dealing with those that want to comment after the fact? Because I know that happens with Salt Lake City when they do Facebook Live Q&As on different projects. People love to drop in the chats afterwards, say it's for a construction project. Oh, hey, they keep going in the chat. How do people deal with that? Do you try to respond? Do you have a cutoff time? And then in turn, how do you share that information with the decision makers, but also others who participated live, if you will. Has anyone figured out a solution for that?
It's a lot of work. Because it's wrangling, you know, there's somebody that like our social media person monitors those channels all the time. They see those, they grab the questions, they send them along to whom they think are the best people to answer them. They send the answers back and then they post a response typically. So, I mean, it's a lot of steps and it's really kind of convoluted. And I'd love to hear better ways to do it, but I'm just not sure there is, you know.
I think you have to make a really clear commitment to do social media or don't do it, because I think you're right. That is the biggest issue. I think people will comment. So you either need to set the parameters very clearly at the top of the feed or pinned to the page that we're going to respond to comments for this period of time. And then after that, we're not going to, or this is for information only and we will not be reviewing comments. Or, you know, in the case of something more like an active group, then you have to take that into consideration. But we're running a large 6,000 member Facebook group for UDOT right now in Layton. And we have 5 people who kind of all pitch in to keep that moving. And it does require quite a bit of effort, but it's worth the effort in the end. Like the return that we get in terms of positive comments and public trust and that kind of stuff but it can also turn on a dime. So you really have to be careful.
Yeah, like Leah, we do like comment periods way back, you know, reminiscent of the NEPA days, comment periods, and say that we'll be responding to questions and comments in a certain period of time. I've also used Facebook's question and answer tool before to mixed results. So giving like an actual forum in a 24-hour period to ask as many questions or comments as possible. I don't know if either are really the best solution, but they work. Social media, depending on the topic, can really become a beast and overwhelm one or more person's time, especially if the topic is really controversial. So yeah, sometimes the choices that we make is we're not going to do social. We just don't have time. If you want to do a comment, you have to get an email or call or come to a meeting.
When people respond to these online comments, are you using canned answers, or you try to be creative with every question that comes in?
Definitely canned if you have them, right? I think we try to point people back to other posts. If those are things that have already been done, we try to point people back to FAQ docs or web pages where the information is, and then copy and paste and put that in the response. You know, you can find this here and then paste it and respond. But yeah, you do still have to revise so that it's relevant to the specifics of the comment.
So we've talked about the time needed. How are people doing with their needed resources? Is it one of those situations where you have to, you know, make do with what you have? You're able to gain resources for this new reality? And if you are able to, what are the costs that you're seeing in moving into these hybrid environments?
There's definitely the added cost of, you know, the Zoom accounts where maybe you wouldn't have thought about this before, because to be able to record and store some of those long-term, you know, just to have kind of that in storage, and just, you know, to be able to save those. Because I mean, the free packages definitely don't give you everything that you need. So I would say for the duration of the projects, that's just a monthly expense you kind of have to build in to be able to have access to those whenever you need them.
One of the things I hadn't anticipated that we need more of now is review time on the part of the client. There's just, it feels like more, I don't know if it's, I think what it used to equate to is production time, but now it's sort of like internal review time because we're talking about things in different ways, or we're considering people in the room and online, or we're doing a thing and then we're recording it and then we're editing it and then we're doing it somewhere else. So it feels like there's maybe more approval or review sort of iteration. That could just be my set of clients. I don't know.
So broadly, how are people feeling? I mean, are people comfortable moving into this in this new direction? Do you wish we had gone back? Because the challenges are there. It's like how UDOT is facing them and wanting to stick with online and in person separately. But how are people feeling about this next stage in engagement? Engagement, our world is sort of in shook. I mean, it's shook the past 2 years, right? We keep changing. Every few months we have something different. Overall, how are people feeling moving into this next stage?
That's a tough question because I really like the aspects that we are able to serve a lot more people from wherever they are versus in the past. I mean, I would say that there were a lot of people that couldn't make it to a meeting either because of time or they just don't have the means of transportation. This way, I mean, even if they can get to a library or if they have a good internet, don't even have to have a good internet connection at home, that they can still interact with their local government, which is, I think, getting a lot of good play. I mean, it's more resource intensive for sure. I'm concerned about a few of our other boards and commissions that don't have extra staff. I think they're probably going to either end up doing a one or the other, either in person or all online, just because of staff requirements. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll find out, right? I guess it's up to us to do a good job, and if it works, then it works and it'll expand. And if it doesn't, then we'll just go back to doing what we're doing.
And I'll say, for my own 2 cents, I'm personally excited about it too. I think in the past 2 years, just thinking about what Salt Lake City did when we moved really online, starting in March 2020, our engagement numbers increased. And because we were more opportunities, it wasn't in the traditional 5 o'clock, come to this meeting or open house and tell us what you think. And we really expanded that. But we also know at the same time, for those who didn't have access to computer equipment or didn't have that technology, working on the digital equity piece, we were leaving those folks behind. And I feel as long as we take the lessons of the past 2 years and know, let's not go back to 5 o'clock meetings and ask people to come, but giving them an opportunity in multiple ways, this could really help in both senses, in helping with our numbers as well as getting more people to participate. There was a great session that Leah participated in this past summer in quality versus quantity, and really trying to find that bridge of giving people real, true opportunities to engage in whatever the project might be, whatever the decision might be. Is there anything else people want to talk about? I really appreciate everyone sharing today, but does anyone have any other thoughts? All right. Well, hey, thanks again, everyone. We really appreciate it. And again, know that this is part of a monthly series. Next month, we're going to be talking about another engagement project, but just know if you are interested in sharing your projects with the group, just shoot me an email. I'm elizabeth.bueller@slcgov.com, and we are happy to include you. Thank you, everyone, for coming today.